to the scene-wise analysis of Act 3, Scene 3 of the play Hamlet, Prince of Denmark. Now, the Act 3, Scene 3 of the play Hamlet, Prince of Denmark is otherwise known as the prayer scene. It has around 98 lines, and the principal characters are King Claudius, Prince Hamlet, Polonius, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. The scene has two important soliloquies uttered by King Claudius and Prince Hamlet, which actually reveal their conscientious and moral and ethical nature. The scene also reveals the complex relationship between King Claudius and Prince Hamlet and their growing sense of suspicion and apathy towards each other, which is often reflected in the lines uttered by the two characters on various occasions. In Act 1, Hamlet is calling his uncle as Uncle Father. And in another occasion we find in the play, within the play scene, we find Claudius addressing Hamlet as our cousin. The widening chasm between the two characters are becoming more evident in the scene. The scene opens in the private chamber of King Claudius in the night as he is seen conversing with the two childhood companions of Hamlet, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. The scene is of great importance since the previous meetings with the two childhood companions took place during the daytime and that too in his court. But the third meeting takes place in the night and that too in his private chamber, since he has to disclose his worry, anxiety and a kind of suspicion caused by the unnatural behavior and excited nature of Hamlet expressed during the interlude in the previous scene. So we find here King Claudius making a very firm decision to send Hamlet to England in order to bring home the financial tribute from England to the Kingdom of Denmark. And he is officially assigning a role to the childhood companions to escort Prince Hamlet while he is on his new mission. The scene is important since it also reveals the anger and the resentment King Claudius has for Prince Hamlet and his firm belief that Hamlet is becoming mad. We saw in the previous scene, Act 3, Scene 1 ends with its remark that the madness of great minds must not unwatched go. So that is a very clear indication that he is watching Hamlet closely in order to detain him if he is expressing himself too much in a weird manner. We find Rosencrantz and Guildenstern instantly agreeing to the request of King Claudius and appreciating his prudence, since the life of the king is important than the life of individuals or subjects of the kingdom. Therefore, they value the life of King Claudius and are ready to embark on their new journey with Prince Hamlet to England. So the scene also reveals the growing conspiracy that is there against Hamlet, which is hatched by the caucus that is in his own palace. As the childhood companions leave, we find Polonius coming in to let King Claudius know that Prince Hamlet has gone to the private chamber of Queen Gertrude to have a secret meeting. And the scene is a very clear indication of the vicious caucus that is there at work against Prince Hamlet in his own palace. And we find Polonius promising King Claudius that he will be listening to the conversation between mother and Prince Hamlet by hiding behind the arras, and he will let him know about the entire conversation that transpire between the mother and son the very night before he goes to bed. But the promise made by Polonius is of great dramatic irony, since he is not going to fulfill the promise he has offered to King Claudius in this scene. As Polonius leaves, we find King Claudius uttering his soliloquy, and the soliloquy reveals the moral compunctions of King Claudius, and it can be considered as the verbal expression of the mind of a sinner. We find the soliloquy uttered by King Claudius as the clear expression of the mindset of a sinner. If the soliloquy of Macbeth can be considered as the verbal expression of a murderer, we can find the soliloquy uttered by King Claudius as a clear expression of the psyche of a sinner, because we find here King Claudius expressing the heavy burden he bears in his heart for the second time. In the previous scene 1 of Act 3, in an aside, he speaks about the heavy burden he bears in his mind. And in the soliloquy, he is stating very clearly how he has broken 3 important commandments of God. As he says, "For which I did the murder, my crown, mine own ambition, and my queen." So it is clear breaking of the commandments of God when he has coveted his brother's wife, his brother's kingship, and the avaricious nature that has made him so much filled with overvaulting ambition. And here he is confessing in clear terms about the sinful ways and his inability to control his overvaulting ambition and his sinful nature. Therefore, Claudius knows about the sin he has committed, the extent of the sin, and the solution to get salvation. He knows that God is benevolent, and if we seek forgiveness, God will forgive him. He also knows that he needs to quit the sinful ways in order to seek forgiveness from God, which he is not ready. Therefore, the sin of Claudius is the sin of omission and the purposeful decision to remain in the sinful state even after knowing about the extent of his sin. Because of his avaricious and ambitious nature, he is unable to turn over a new leaf, even though he knows that in order to attain salvation, he needs to quit his sinful ways. The soliloquy reveals his firm decision to continue in a sinful life, since he understands that he cannot be a hypocrite and deceive God as he deceives people. And he is unwilling to quit the privileges that he has attained through sinful ways in his life. And he knows that unless he seeks forgiveness and quit his sinful life, he has no salvation. And he does not desire the salvation at the expense of the golden crown and the wife he has secured through underhand ways. As Prince Hamlet sees King Claudius on his knees in prayer, and that too in a defenseless state, he has a strong urge to stab him from behind, which he did not do, since he wanted to deny the possibility of King Claudius to get the privilege of salvation. When he dies, when he was in prayer. Instead, he actually wanted King Claudius to be killed when he was engaged in some act of carnal desires and worldly pleasures so that he can ensure his eternal damnation. Therefore, he decides to postpone the act of murder to a much more propitious time when he can ensure his eternal damnation. Hamlet decides to leave the chamber of King Claudius to meet his mother, since she is already waiting for him in her chamber. As Hamlet leaves to meet his mother at her chamber, we find Claudius concluding his soliloquy by his firm decision to remain in his sinful ways, because even during his prayers he was plotting against Hamlet.